Okay, I think we'll go ahead and get started. I know probably half the people that are coming aren't in here yet, but that's their loss, right? So we'll get rolling here. We're looking at continuing our financial course, and we're going to be looking at spending. Last week we looked at savings. We're looking at spending this week and debt, which kind of goes with the hand in hand next week. So that's kind of where we're headed. So some of the stuff some of you are interested in on the investments and all that kind of stuff. That's still down the road a little bit, so we'll get to it eventually. But let's pray. Father, we thank you for the finances you give us. Most of us are blessed in abundant ways, probably beyond what we thought we'd ever have. You've been gracious to us. We know some of our folks, even here at the church, are struggling financially, or just beginning and starting out in their life of finances. And so we pray that this course is helpful to wherever people are in their financial world, and whether it's just starting, whether it's in poverty, or whether it's doing well. But we want to use your resources you give us to your glory. So we pray in Christ's name. Amen. Okay, so here's our principle. Here's the principle we're using, that overarching principle of financial life. And this is the one that if you follow, you'll do okay, one way or the other. But if you spend less than you earn, do it for a long time, you'll be financially successful. That's a lot of ifs there, maybe, even though there's only one, but you got to do it for a long period of time. And a lot of people get ahead of themselves. They want to get wealthy or get financially stable or whatever very quickly. It usually takes some time. We looked at last week at saving and compound interest and how that works, and these are things that really help us. But one of the things that really will short circuit your finances will be spending and debt. So it's not always how much we bring in, it's how we use it once we get it. I've been interested to watch over the years people that have two families, whatever, who have pretty similar incomes, and to see one that thrives, does very well financially, and other people who are making about the same income who are always in financial doo-doo. Okay, whatever that, I think that's a Greek word, but they never seem to be able to get above it, and yet other people that are maybe more modest income who do very well, and some of that has to do with how we deal with it, how we invest it, where we put it, but an awful lot of it has to do with how we spend it. And so this particular section here, I hope, will be helpful to us as we think about that. But some of the lessons here, some of the portions of this is hard to take, because this is kind of out of vogue with our world today, and people struggle with that. So we'll take a look. We're going to start with looking at some important topics, and the first one is going to be inflation. So as we're thinking about saving, inflation plays a big role here. So I'm going to just kind of give you an illustration of how that works, because I think a lot of people, they know there's inflations out there. Some people believe that Trump won the election because of inflation. Inflation ran away with us for a while and got up there 9-10%, and was really caused a lot of problems for a lot of people. And just because inflation is backed off to 2 to 3%, more like 3%, that means it's not growing but 3%. But the prices are not coming down in most places. Once they're set, they're pretty much set. Very, very hard to get prices to come down. If it does come down, they call it deflation, and the economists will tell you that's worse than inflation. There's nothing worse than deflation. That's what tanked Germany after World War II. It's just deflation's a bad thing. So if you're used to paying $10 a head to go out to eat before the pandemic, and now you're paying closer to $20, that's probably never going to come back down. What you can do is look for deals. Look for places that you can get better prices for things, but the main prices are not going to probably come down very much, and that's because there's so much baked into this. You got wages that have gone up tremendously. You got people working at Taco Bell for $18 to $20 an hour, and when those kind of restaurants, and if you're doing that, it's very hard to bring your taco prices back down to where they were a few years ago. It just doesn't work. So we're not probably going to see any rescinding of our inflation numbers, but we can slow down the increase. And that's kind of what we're talking about here. So inflation's a killer financially, and not many people navigate inflation very well. And as a result of that, there's a lot of heartache with that. So the fact that inflation hurt so many people may have been the reason Trump won the election. I guess the pundits say a lot of reasons, but I think that definitely has something to do with it because most people vote their pocketbook. And if they're squeezed when they go to the grocery store or the gas station or out to eat, then or their utilities or their taxes, those things mount up, and they notice those things, and they want somebody to fix them. And we'll see if they get fixed. But that's the point. Let's take a look at inflation. I'll give you an example of how inflation works against us. Let's say we have a $10,000 investment. We put $10,000 into a CD that's paying 5.25%. Now, right now, that would be very hard to find. You could, if you work at it, you get about 5% still in a CD. And actually, interest rates on these kind of products are going up a little bit. Money markets are actually had moved up recently. You can get a money market account for 4.65%, and that's pretty close to this. But we're going to go at 5.25, since that's what I have in my PowerPoint, whether you like it or not. Okay. So at the end of the year, you will have made $525 in your investment, right? That's how much interest you've earned on that $10,000. But don't jump ahead too quickly, because if you're in the 15% tax bracket, then you're going to pay $78.75 of taxes on that money you earned. So that's going to take things down a little bit. And if inflation is going at 5%, then at that point you are, what we got here? Okay, so 5%, you got the $525 you made, but after taxes and inflation, the money is actually worth $9,946. So even though you had the money invested at 5.25, you actually lost purchasing power. And so that's a loss. That's a definite loss, okay? If inflation really booms, such as a 12%, which we didn't quite get up there during this pandemic time, I don't think. I think we got up closer to 10%, didn't we? But in the past, we have gone up over 12, so we're going to go with that here. If inflation goes to 12%, then your money is now only worth, your purchasing power, $9,246. So in other words, even though you had the money invested and you were making money on your CDs or money market, you actually lost purchasing power if inflation's at 5%. So that's what we're talking about all the time when when people are looking at raises or cost of living raises. Just staying up with inflation is not easy. So at Social Security, for example, I think next year, what is it? What's the increase for next year? 2.5%. So a few years ago, it went up quite a bit more because of the inflation was higher. But all that is doing is keeping up with inflation. So right now, if Social Security, for example, for people on Social Security, goes up 2.5%, and inflation right now is really bumping closer to 3%, then the purchasing power for seniors goes down. Okay, so that really, it helps them some to get an increase, but also if they're also have other money coming in, they're also going to pay taxes on that increase. So it's kind of hard to get out from under it when inflation is, especially if inflation is booming. So money is lost in its purchasing power. You're actually making money on the front, but you're paying out taxes and purchasing power and so forth, so that you're actually losing money. So if we stayed at the 5%, which is more normal right now, you've lost $54 purchasing power, even though you had it invested. Now, if you didn't have it invested, if you just had money in the checking account, then you lost a lot more than that because you didn't make any money. You didn't make the $525. So you actually are down closer to $600 in purchasing power. So inflation is a killer. It really hurts a lot of people a lot of times. So especially we're talking about middle class and poor people that don't have much of a means of raising their income. All right, so it's going to require you then to continually earn more to stay even. So let's take a look. I think I got a thing here. No, I don't. Okay, let me just give you this. If you made $30,000 a year, just a number, and inflation is 5%, you would need to earn $31,500 next year just to have the same purchasing power. And that doesn't count taxes, which would you need to pay $225 in federal taxes. You need to pay $210 in Social Security. And so even at a 5% raise, you would still lose $435 a year. So unless you can outmaneuver inflation, unless you can bring in more money than inflation, you're continually losing purchasing power. And that hurts people. They don't even know it. They're losing it sometimes, but they're losing it. Now, as a result of inflation, we now have a now society which believes that we have to buy things before the price goes up. That's the higher the inflation, the more people think like that, even if they have to charge it at 18 to 27% interest on their credit card. So we got to buy it now before the price goes up. Yet, inflation can actually work for you if you become a lender rather than a borrower. So if you're borrowing money at these rates, then you're going to go backwards. But you can lend money by buying instruments that give you good interest rate, and you can actually earn from that. You can gain from that. Let me give you a good example. Back in the golden era, some years ago, back in the Carter administration, if you remember the Carter administration, that was painful for everybody in the world except seniors, just about. Because seniors had some money accumulated with no place to go with it. Interest rates got up to 13 to 17% in that era. I actually bought a CD at 17% in that era. I only had $2,000. I didn't make much money, but I'm still proud of my 17%. So if you were a senior and you had a bunch of cash, and say you had $100,000 with not much to do with it, you put that out of the CD at 17% or 15%, you made a bundle. And seniors didn't have the constant turnover of expenses that some did. And so that was the golden era in some ways for seniors who had that extra money to put into those things. So they became lenders instead of borrowers. By lending, they actually made money in the process instead of losing money. So that was a good time for a lot of seniors. So I'll stop there for just a second, and I'm going to talk about some of the myths of inflation. Any thoughts or questions? So you're going to have to stay up. If inflation is moving forward, you're going to have to stay up just to stay even. Okay, Ron Blue in his book on Mastering Your Money comes up with 4 myths of inflation that I think are wise counsel, something worth looking at. Number 1, the first myth is that we have to buy now because it's going to cost more later. So you can't put off buying a car because next year it's going to be higher. And that is not necessarily true. That's a myth that causes us to rationalize our greeds instead of our needs, buying things that we want rather than what we need. So in reality, if you don't need it, anything's expensive. You know, if you really don't need it and you're going to buy it just because you think they're going to go up next year, but you don't really need it, that's not a wise investment. That's kind of foolish there. And we'll come to this in a moment, but not everything goes up even during inflation. So some things go up, but some things come down. So for example, food prices have gone up, but electronics have gone down. You know, TVs are not anywhere near the cost they were some years ago. You can buy a lot of electronic gadgets for much cheaper than you could a few years ago. So some things go down. You got to watch for those kinds of things. But the other things are overall going up. Here's another myth: always borrow to buy. Now, you ever heard the term use other people's money? Okay, that's a good way to go bankrupt. You know, unless you're really savvy and you got a lot of money to set back on. You know, even the millionaires and the billionaires often will use other people's money. So, for example, why does Apple, that has $200 billion sitting in a bank account somewhere, why do they go out and get credit? Because they believe they can use other people's money to their best advantage. But you're not Apple. You're just a normal person. And if you're thinking that you have to borrow in order to use other people's money, you've got to be really careful with that. Because whenever you put yourself in debt, you put yourself in a position where you could falter. You are not omniscient. You don't know how things are going to go. So I would encourage you on that one. If you don't have the resources to back your money, let's say you want to buy a car for $40,000, and you decide you got the money in the bank, but you do not want to spend that money. You want to keep it working for you in the stock market or whatever. But so you're going to instead borrow money, use other people's money. So you go out and you get a loan for your car. You might get one of these teaser rates where you can get a loan for 2% or 0% sometimes. And so you're not putting out any extra money, and you're okay, all right? That's just fine as long as you can keep making the payments. But if something goes wrong, and say your health breaks, you lose your job, and suddenly you have a $40,000 debt and no income to speak of to come in, what's going to happen? You're going to lose your car, and you're going to ding your credit rating, and you're going to do harm to yourself, and you're going to live a lot of sleepless nights because you can't pay the bill. So if you've got the money reserved to pay it if you had to, I think it's all right to borrow if you think that's a good plan, but only if you have the means by which to pay it off if you have to. So unless you're a really savvy business person, do you know how many times Donald Trump went bankrupt? His creditors do. I think 3 times. All right. So he would go out and borrow huge amounts of money for something and go bankrupt. But Donald Trump is Teflon. Nothing really sticks to people like that. They just keep on rolling. You're not Donald Trump. You're not Teflon. Don't take a chance on hurting yourself financially for years and years and years because you went out and did something like that. Yeah.
Kind of like, I don't know what happened actually with Donald Trump, but typically, those guys, when they go bankrupt, their personal income does not get them.
That's right.
They're in some limited liability thing, and that tanks, but their personal income does not. That doesn't work the same way with you.
That's right, because they've got other people actually putting up the money. They've learned how to work these systems because they're very savvy, got tons of lawyers working for them. Again, it's not us. So be careful putting your money out in such a way you could lose a lot in the process. I've known people who have just been very confident that they were going to start a business and make big money. They were absolutely certain they were going to do it. And they borrowed big money, mortgaged your house, and so forth in order to start this business. And it didn't go the way they thought it would go. And what happened? They lost their houses. They lost their livelihood. They never have totally recovered because they were absolutely certain they could not go wrong. Well, you don't know that. So I think a conservative approach for most of us is better than taking that big chance where you could do a lot of harm to yourself. Okay, that's the second one. Let's see what I want to see here. On this one too, borrowing, always borrow to buy. We talked about this a little bit last time, but you want to be very careful about purchasing anything on credit that is a depreciating item. So that's for most of it, that's cars, maybe a boat, maybe furniture, right? So we did talk about this last time. So you go down to one of the furniture stores, they got a hot deal. You can buy your whole living room outfit, your bedroom outfit, $20,000 worth of stuff. You don't have to make a payment for 4 years, and there's no interest, right? Unless you forget to pay. And then the interest starts flooding in at 25 to 30%, and you get caught in that kind of stuff. And on top of that, your furniture is going downhill financially. Okay, if you don't believe that, I trust you do. If you don't believe that, think about a couch or a chair that you bought some time ago, and let's say you paid $1,000 or $2,000 for that furniture. Put it on eBay or whatever and see how much you can get for it. You'll be lucky to get 20% on a good couch, good chair. So you put out a $2,000 couch, and you'll be lucky to pay it sell for $400. That's a big, big loss. Same thing with cars. Everybody knows as soon as you drive a new car off the lot, the depreciation kicks in pretty quickly, and over a period of 4 years or so, 40 to 60% of the value of the car is gone, unless you buy a particular kind of car that holds its value, which is rare. But for the most part, you're going to lose quite a bit of money in that. Those are depreciating items. So it doesn't really make sense to be borrowing for depreciating items. And so when we're talking about cars and stuff, you can, I would recommend, as I said before, that you buy a car that you can afford by cash. If you can't do that yet, you're young, you don't have the resources, then go ahead and get the loan you have to get. But buy a used car that doesn't that you can basically afford, and then when you pay it off as quickly as you can, begin to make payments to yourself for several years, 3 or 4 years, and then build up your own bank account for a next purchase. Then, let's say by then you've got $20,000 in the bank to buy a car. You buy a used car for $20,000, and then after you buy that car, keep it for 4 to 6 or 10 years, and keep on making payments to yourself so that the next car can be a better car if you want one. But you're always making a car payment to yourself, and your goal is, as soon as you can, purchase your cars with cash. Now I realize some of you are not in that position to do that, and so you can't do that yet, but that should be a goal, I think, for everybody, to purchase your vehicles with cash. And I know everybody's different. It depends on your mechanical abilities and how much frustration you want to put up with. You can buy a car for $2,000, but you may not get out of the driveway with it. So that if you can put up with that, that's that's your business. Personally, I have no mechanical abilities. Last time my van last year the battery went bad in the middle of the winter. I was just getting ready to take the grandkids on a trip to Indiana, and it was when it was hit below zero. And I started the van up, and it wouldn't start. The battery was dead, which was a God's gift, really, because if I got out in the middle of nowhere and it didn't work, that wasn't good. So I'm in the garage. I've never opened the hood to my van in its history, because I'm not real sure what's under there. I don't want to know. So I opened it up, and I couldn't find the battery. So that's my ability right there. I couldn't even find the battery. It was covered up underneath some stuff. And, of course, new cars are not like old cars where you got everything up there and you can see it. There's all this junk in there. I honestly couldn't find the battery. So what am I going to do? Well, I called Mr. Battery. They were very gracious. They sent a guy right over, and he replaced my battery and got me rolling within a couple hours, hour and a half, and didn't really charge me an astronomical amount of money. I was very, very thankful for that. But my point is, I'm not going to be a guy who's going to fix things. Okay, if it breaks, it either stays broken. Well, some of you might remember I had a Nissan pickup truck for years. I think it was 22 years old, and it got wrecked by somebody else, and I'm still bitter about that. So they wrecked my car. I was hoping it goes forever, and it got wrecked. And so I have this, and over the years, it systematically lost stuff. It first lost its radio, didn't work. It's going to die. 10 years later, I still don't have a radio. The air conditioning went out. Who needs air conditioning? You got windows. The windows went out. You couldn't roll the windows down, but the window on the passenger side could go down, so that was okay. Systematically, the rust was coming in. The back did that. All sorts of stuff. There's probably 15 things wrong with that truck. But as long as I could get it out of the driveway, I didn't care. Matter of fact, I kind of liked it because it got beat up. Who cared? But I didn't fix anything, thinking it was going to die. And then this guy graciously was T-boned by somebody who was driving my car, and graciously destroyed my car. Okay, so if you're a mechanic and you like to work on things, you can buy a cheaper vehicle and keep it going. But if you're like me, maybe not. So we have different places in life, right? Different abilities and so forth. But my point is this: try to aim down the line. It might be 5 years, might be 10 years, where you're buying cars and furniture and anything that's depreciating that you want, you're buying it with cash. And again, that's a long-term goal, perhaps, but it's very, very important to get there, I believe. Okay. Any thoughts on any of that? Okay, Dan?
There's an extreme illustration, but somebody in Brazil I knew retired and could get a monthly amount for the rest of their lives, or take a lump sum. And what he wanted to buy was an old car, a junk car. And his wife saying, "Okay, we'll have it. We won't be able to afford gas." But I think that we really have to watch watch out for purchases that are more tied to our pride than they are to our necessity.
Yeah, yeah. That's a good point. Yeah. Okay, let's go to the next one. So you can never accumulate enough. So we're going to have to buy on time because inflation's going up, and we can never accumulate enough. But I think we saw last week if you have time and you use the magic of compounding, over time you can have enough to buy what you need. Not necessarily what you want or all your luxuries, but you can do that. Then the last one is inflation rate is standard for everyone. But the CPI index, the Consumer Price Index, is a national average that assumes that everyone is making significant purchases monthly. And everybody's not doing that. So if the price of houses are going up, and they went up even in Springfield during the pandemic, which is unusual, right? Prices of houses in this area haven't gone up much over the years. They went up significantly the last 3 or 4 years, and people are buying for crazy like. But most people, and let's say the seniors, for example, aren't buying a new house every year. So it doesn't really matter if their house went up or the houses around them went up, because they're not buying. They're in their house and they're happy there, and they're staying there. So and if you have a reliable car, you're not buying a new car every year. And you don't have to go out to eat 4 times a week. You can go out sparingly or learn how to cook. That's another option. Not with gas, though. Gas is bad, right? So I'm just kidding. But there's other options. And have you noticed lately how I think Wendy's kind of started it with their biggie bags? I don't know if any of you go eat out at Wendy's. Biggie bags, you get a hamburger, some chicken nuggets, some fries, and a drink, I think it is, for $5. No, that's biggie bags. That's Wendy's. I know that. McDonald's has now followed suit, and so has the Burger King. So there's an inflation thing. There's a competition going on. So if you're not real picky about where you get your chicken nuggets, you don't have to go out where you're paying $15 for them. You can go to a place that's got a pretty good deal. I mean, with a biggie bag, I just explained, Marcia and I can both eat on the biggie bag. She doesn't get much, but we're all going to get a little bit of something. There's fries in there too. Now she gets 2 fries. She gets 2 fries, and I let her have most of the nuggets, and the pickle. She can have the pickle.
Yeah, but she gets the Frosties, so.
No, we don't get any Frosties with that deal. You got to pay another $1 for a Frosty. I'm not buying that. But if you're just noticing, there's some pressure going on because people just kind of said, no, wait a minute, that's enough. You know, if you go out to a restaurant, so the other day I go out to eat with some guys. I paid $18 for lunch because now you got not only buy your lunch, but you got to throw out $3 or $4 for a tip. That's a lot of money for lunch. Now, I only do that when I'm going out with somebody most of the time. But people that do that on a regular basis, you're going to have to really up your budget. So there's other ways to do things. I know this is old-fashioned and weird and even maybe sinful, but you actually can pack a meal. You know, you can bring a sandwich to work. I eat oatmeal 4 times a week here at church, and that's pretty cheap. It's good for your body. It's got a lot of protein. It's got low calories. And I'm getting sick of it. But you know, I don't have to go out. It doesn't take me an hour and a half to eat. I don't have to pay $15 for a meal. I'm paying 35 cents, you know, and I don't buy Starbucks coffee. I mean, that's just me, you know. So you guys do what you want to do, but there's lots of ways to cut back if you want to and save money and quit, and you have to manage your spending to do that. Okay, those are the 4 myths of inflation that Ron Blue mentions. Now let's go on to look at some basic principles that would help us in these areas. I'm going to wait for just a moment of that. It's been said by those who seem to know that if all money were distributed equally, that is, so some Marxist group came in here, took everybody's money, put it in one big pool, and then gave everybody equal amounts. So every home in America had the exact same amount of money in there. That in one generation, it would return to the wealthy people. And that's because those people know how to manage money, and people that don't know how to manage money will waste it and lose it. in one generation, 30, 40 years, it'd be right back to the same people. And that's probably true. 80% of those who go bankrupt once go bankrupt a second time. Why? Because they never readjusted how they spend their money and how they invest their money. And so they keep, if you go bankrupt and you keep on doing the same old things, you'll probably go bankrupt again. 80% do. That's an amazing number, isn't it? And then I've always liked this little statement here. We buy things we don't need with money we don't have to impress people we don't like. Yeah, I really kind of like that. You know, who are we impressing here? Now here's some practical guidelines, some basic principles. Begin living on a cash basis. I'm going to look at some scripture with you. Go to Proverbs chapter 22. This is what distinguishes a Christian financial plan from a secular one. There's overlap, but we have different priorities. The book of Proverbs, the book of wisdom, tells us a lot of great things about finances. It says in chapter 22, verse 7, the rich rules over the poor, and the borrower is the slave of the lender. So if we're borrowing from people, we are slaves. We become slaves to those who lend to us. In other words, somebody else is calling the shots financially to some degree in your life. Go over to chapter 31, verse 16. Concerning the excellent wife, it says she makes plans for a field and buys it. From the fruit of her hand, she plans a vineyard. See, we see this excellent wife planning ahead. She invests money in a field, and then she gets produce, and she makes money on that. And so we find that she is first buying the field. Over time, she gets produce from that field. Okay, here's another principle. Consider how each purchase will increase or decrease your Christ-like character. Go to 1 Timothy chapter 6. So does how we spend our money have anything to do with our character? I think it does. 1 Timothy chapter 6, verses 6 through 9. But godliness actually is a means of great gain when accompanied by contentment. For we brought nothing into the world, so we cannot take anything out of it either. If we have food and covering, with these we shall be content. But those who want to get rich fall into temptation and a snare in many foolish and harmful desires, which plunge men into ruin and destruction. Those are wise words. So if we're spending money foolishly, and we think that money is going to bring us contentment and happiness, then we're probably being fooled. If our life's purchases didn't bring us happiness, why would the next set of purchases bring us happiness? So we should look at our motivations as to why we're doing some of these things. Number 3, make your spending money difficult to get to. I don't have any scripture on that necessarily, but one of the reasons why we spend so much is it's so easy to spend. So let me suggest some things that you may not like. But number 1, don't carry around a lot of cash that you could easily spend. So maybe limit how much money you carry around. If you are prone to knee-jerk and spend money on credit cards, and you can't control that, then leave your credit cards home. Put them in a drawer. Put them on ice. Remember I told you before about that one? So I recommended to somebody once that they freeze their credit card, literally, put it in a block of ice, an ice tray, and freeze it, because they just couldn't control themselves. Every little thing came up, they wanted to charge it. So in order to get their credit card out of freeze, they had to get an ice pick, or at least take the time to thaw it out, and that would take an hour or two. And by then, often their desire to spend was over. So if you got to know yourself. You know, if that's your problem, you got to know yourself and how you can control yourself. Know what you want before you go shopping. So if you have a plan to buy stuff, know what that is, so that you're not being taken in by all the bargains. And that's another thing. Reject bargain items you're not looking for. So you go to the store, the clothing store, and boy, you just got to have that extra blouse or scarf or whatever, pair of shoes. Or you guys go to Menards and just got to have that tool that you're probably not going to use anyway, but it's a beautiful tool and you really need to have it. And so you go and you so know what you really want before you go, and reject bargain items you're not looking for or you don't need. Part of the problem now, however, is that it's become so much easier to knee-jerk and what's the word I'm looking for? Impulsively buy things than before because of Amazon and places like Amazon. So in confession, I have an Amazon account set up so that I can push basically one button and buy everything in my cart. That is a dream for Christmas. So my grandkids are sending me exactly what they want. They send me a link. I look it over. I push what they want. It goes to my cart. I've got 4 or 5 items sitting there. I don't have to leave the house. I don't have to take my house shoes off. I push a button and I purchase these items. That's a dream. You know what? They almost are. We just got some stuff today that I ordered 2 days ago. It came today. It's just insane. I probably couldn't drove somewhere and got them any quicker.
You gotta figure it out, when you go online and look at Amazon, at least with me, I don't even have to enter my identification. As soon as I log on, I know who I am. I've got everything stored, all I have to do is hit the
Exactly. My credit card's there. Hi, Gary. How you doing? haven't seen you in a while. Are you back? And if you look I looked at something the other day. I was looking at maps, not because I wanted to buy a map, because I couldn't figure out where Brian and Priscilla were in Connecticut. So I looked, and now I'm getting a thing every day. Hey, Gary, did you want to buy a map? You know? No, I don't want to buy a map. Anyway, so they got all that. It's easy as can be, but it's so easy. It's so easy. Look at something, and oh wow, I've got to have that book. I don't have enough books, you know. So I've got to have that book. So bam, I got that book. Yeah, Karen.
You made the point about freezing your credit
Yeah.
cards. But I mean, most people have Apple Pay or Venmo on
Yeah.
their phone, so half the time I leave my wallet at home. So I don't even need my credit card.
Yeah.
To make a purchase.
Yeah.
Now that's something I've had friends that said they just had to make their phone dumb again, take all those ways of paying off because it was too much of a temptation.
Yeah, that's right. If that's your,
Credit cards.
so it's much easier now, like you said, because I got stuff on my phone. I got Apple Pay somehow. I don't know what it does but I get a bill every month, so I must be buying something. But yeah, you got the Vimos, you got all these kind of things. So simple. I've just made part of that up, but I usually know what I purchase. Okay, so yeah, and so if you are a person who tends to fall for these things, you're going to have to know yourself well enough to control yourself, and you may not be able to control yourself without some help. So you might go with a friend to some place, or your husband or whatever, give them the phone. I don't know, whatever it works for you. Scott?
Do you still recommend large purchases like automobile or appliance to do your research with Consumer Reports and check which one is rated higher in that?
Yeah, you can do that, but you got to usually have to have a subscription to the Consumer Report.
You go to the library.
You go to the library and do that, but then I got to get out of my house shoes and go in there. Can you? You can go to there's lots of places to check out things, but you should, yeah. If you're going to buy something, you ought to check out how it's holding up.
Major purchase, yeah.
The problem with that now, keep in mind, there's all sorts of people putting out their recommendations, thumbs up and down, who are being paid to say this is the greatest product I've ever seen, or this is a piece of junk. And these are computers that are doing that. So those kind of things the Yelp and that kind of stuff are not reliable. Don't go by that. You're better off talking to people that you know that has had a product and can recommend it, or somebody you can definitely trust. Because these are things online. These are paid advertisers to do these things.
So Buick or Honda?
Huh?
Buick or a Honda, right?
Well, Honda, there's no question what you get. You get a Honda, but that's another thing.
What do you suggest to married couples as far
Yeah, I recommend on any major purchase that they're in agreement. They've talked about it and decided what they wanted to get. I've often recommended in premarital counseling and marital counseling that people have a small amount of money, maybe $20 a week or whatever, that is their money to do whatever they want to. They want to go out to Starbucks, they want to go out to buy something, not something simple. Nobody has to be accountable for that. But larger purchases, I think we should be in agreement on. Okay, what else we got here? Okay, I've got that. Okay, by the way, I don't know. I think Dave Ramsey says don't have credit cards at all. Did you say that? Dave Ramsey's multi-trillionaire. He can buy airplanes. He doesn't have to have a credit card to get them. How are you going to reserve your flights? How are you going to reserve a car, a rental car, these types of things without a credit card? I don't know how you do that. So, but you can use those when you need them, when you have to have them. But the point is often they control us. So, and if you go on a trip, for example, out of town, out of state, you better take a credit card. You know, you may need it, and you may want to take 2 credit cards. I got one place once, and they shut me down. They denied my credit card, and the reason why they denied it is because I was traveling out of state, and they saw I was traveling out of state and shut down my credit. Well, that was fun. I was at a gas station trying to get gas. I couldn't get gas because they said I guess I should have told them that I was going to travel. But anyway, be careful with that kind of stuff. It's only happened to me once, but it wasn't much fun. So, and I didn't know how to fix it at the time. That was years ago. Okay, know what you want before you shop. That's helpful. Reject bargain items you weren't looking for. We talked about. Associate the cost of purchase with the sacrifice it took to earn it. So it's not just how much it costs, but how much work did you have to do to get it? So if you're making $20 an hour and you want to buy a $100 item, that's going to take 5 hours out of your work life to pay for that. So is it worth it? Is that worth 5 hours of your day to buy that $100 item? Maybe it is. Maybe it isn't. That's a good way to look at it. Become a friend. This is from Ron Blue. Become a friend to the seller who passes the test of character. In other words, if you find a good mechanic that you can trust, then maybe you ought to stay with that person, even though you have to spend a few more bucks. If you find a good carpenter, you find somebody you can trust in some other area, maybe it's worth a little more because you get a cut rate deal from somebody else and you wish you'd never done it for a long, long time. So if you can find somebody you can trust, look for those kinds of people and help them out. Build sales resistance. The salesmen are trained to break down your resistance. So you go in to buy a car. Have you noticed how salesmen very quickly get you off onto other subjects like your family, your life's vacation, blah, blah, your kids, whatever? That's because they're trying to distract you from the purchase and get you off on other subjects. They've been trained on how to do that. So build in resistance there to that. They're experts, and don't let that happen to you. Go to Philippians chapter 4, verse 12. Chapter 4, verse 12 of Philippians. Look at what it says here. And this is in the area of contentment. 4:12. I know how to get along with humble means. I also know how to live in abundance. In any and all things, I have learned the secret of being filled and of going hungry, both of having abundance and suffering need. So Paul is basically saying here, look, I don't have to have stuff in order to be content. If you have to have stuff to be content, you'll never be content because you keep buying things and you're still not content, right? So your contentment comes from living for Christ. These other things are extra. Here are some things as we build resistance. Ask yourself, do you need it? When somebody's trying to sell you something, do you need it? Am I buying more than I need? Does it do what it claims? You know, it's amazing what claims there are on television for some of this stuff. Will it soon be outdated? So are you buying clothing that will be out of style next year? You're spending top bucks for that kind of thing? Some of you are wearing things that are 30 years old and doesn't bother you, but some people care, right? So be careful with that. Does my use justify the purchase? So I'm thinking about this one. So you want to cut down a small tree or trim your trees at home. Okay, you need a chainsaw. Now you could go out and buy a chainsaw for several $100s, or you could go rent one for a few bucks or borrow one from a friend. Now the question is, how often are you going to use that chainsaw? You going to use it once or twice in your lifetime? Or are you just going to, or is it something you're going to use all the time? So don't go out and spend a bunch of money on something that you're going to only use on occasion. Am I paying unnecessary overhead and middleman? Okay, this is a little difficult to say, but there's a lot of money lost in the middleman process. You're paying middle people, salesmen and so forth, to do things for you that you could do for yourself, and you lose a lot of money. Now again, this is individualistic. So some of you need to pay a middleman, and others don't. Now let me give you two examples. We're going to look at investments in a few weeks. If you have no ability in money, or have no interest in money, and you don't understand it, you don't care to understand it, then you need to hire somebody who does understand it, and somebody you can trust to go the middleman route to help with you with your money. If, on the other hand, you have some financial ability and you're interested in that stuff, you can train yourself to purchase investments without paying commissions. Okay, so most commissions, mutual funds for example, when I first started learning about this back when I was 30 years old, I found that some mutual funds at that time charged an 8.5% interest, a commission or load, they call it, 8.5%. So for every $1,000 you invested, you paid them $85. Got that? Then I started doing research at the library, Scott, and I started finding out that there was equally as good of mutual funds that had no load, no commission. I could buy the exact same product and not lose $85 on every 1,000. That was my first step towards understanding finances. There was no reason to pay the middleman that kind of money if I could do it myself. Now, I could do it myself, and I was interested in doing it, so it worked out. If you're not, then maybe you shouldn't do that. Same thing with insurance, like life insurance, paying the middleman. Now, here's one that's going to really stick in your heads, and maybe you won't like this. Okay, you're going to sell your house. Houses are selling like hotcakes right now. You put a sign in the yard, it's sold by the afternoon. Real estate agents charge 6 to 7% commission. So that means on a $100,000 house, you're paying them $6,000, a $200,000 house, $12,000 commission. You could sell that house yourself. There's no reason in the world why almost anybody couldn't sell their own house. Stick the sign in the yard, know what the house is worth, do a little research, get some advice what the house is worth. Somebody comes to your house and says, I'll give you that money for the house, and you don't lose $12,000 on the commission. He said, well, how can that work? I don't know anything about it. You don't have to. I have a one-page contract that I've used dozens of times for myself and other people that has always worked. You don't have to have these 30-page contracts. And here's a guarantee. If somebody is buying your house with a bank loan, the bank and the title company will not allow them to make a mistake. You will not be taken advantage of because they will protect themselves. And you don't have to pay $12,000 for a commission on a house. Now, we don't have any real estate agents in here, so I think I'm safe. All right? And they would not like to hear that. All right? But that's the case. Now, not everybody can do that. So you're individualistic. But it always kind of breaks my heart to hear somebody, oh yeah, real estate agent called me up. He put a sign in the front yard. I sold it by 3 o'clock. I said, and you paid them $12,000 to let them do that for 3 hours? Well, what else could I do? You could sold it yourself. Does that make me, am I a fanatic? Maybe, I don't know. But you think about it, it is just a sad thing to lose money you don't have to lose. if you don't have to lose it. Okay, here's some more things here. We must always love God more than money. 1 Timothy chapter 6. 1 Timothy chapter 6, verses 9 and 10 says this, "But those who want to get rich fall into temptation and a snare and many foolish and harmful devices, which plunge men into ruin and destruction. For the love of money is the root of all sorts of evil, and some by aspiring to it have wandered away from the faith, piercing themselves with many griefs." Money itself is not evil by any means, it's a tool. But the love of money is evil. The love of money is wrong. Greed is wrong. We always should ask ourselves, why do we want to accumulate more money if we do? Well, what's our goal? What's our purpose? And it should always be to honor God, to have more resources to invest in His work, to take care of myself so others don't have to take care of me. There's high goals that we can have out there. But one of those goals should not be that we love the accumulation of money, that we just want to be rich to be rich. That the love of money is not honoring to God. And then another one, riches cannot be trusted. I think I got one here somewhere. Go down to verse 17 of the same passage, 6:17. "Command those who are rich in this present age not to be haughty, or to set their hopes on the uncertainties of riches, but on God who richly supplies us with all things to enjoy." So riches can't be trusted. They will let us down, or can let us down very easily, but God can always be trusted. So our treasure should be in Him, not in our finances and our wealth. Okay, yeah.
You talked a little bit about needs, like what do we need? It was more on the previous slide. And I was wondering if you have any guidance on how to identify if something is a need or not.
Well, it's a need if you need it, I guess. Yeah, it's a need if we have to have certain things. We have to have shelter. We have to have food. We have to take care of our family. We should be planning ahead to take care of ourselves in the future. So these things are needs. Most people need to have a car, but what kind of car do they need would be the question. Most people have to have a shelter, a house, an apartment, but how much do they need to spend for that? So I think we have to look at where we are in life and our goals in life to see what we personally do need. Relatively little do we really need. Paul said there in Philippians, I'm comfortable with very little. Shelter, and food, and that's what I need. Beyond that, we don't need a whole lot. And so I think we have to look at those type of things. And everybody's going to be individualistic once again. What you think you need is not necessarily what I need. It could be some differences. But most all of us could cut back on what we think we need. Okay, good question. Not real easy answer. Here's an old saying that comes from a different era, different generation, that probably rubs most young people the wrong way. But here it was. People lived by this saying for decades. Use it up, wear it out, make it do, or do without. Now, nobody likes that anymore. But that's a pretty good handle to go by. And then learn just to say no. Okay, that's all right. It's all right to say to the salesman, no. It's all right to say to somebody who wants some of your money, no. Sometimes it's just best to say no. Now that brings us to something else. Loaning to others. One more thing we want to look at. Go to Proverbs 22, verse 7. This comes up in some of our lives. It came up in my life all the way back in my college days when I had saved some money by working several jobs and had some money stuck away, and I made the mistake of telling people that. And some of my poor friends wanted to borrow money from me. And I learned the hard way that wasn't the best thing to do. But let's take a look at a few principles about loaning money to friends and relatives and what will soon be enemies, okay? Don't become a loan company. Proverbs 22, verse 7, the rich rules over the poor, the borrower is a slave of the lender. You're not a loan company, you're not a bank. And if somebody borrows from you, now you have a changed relationship with them. Have you ever done that? And now you suddenly have a changed relationship because they owe you money and you've watched, they owe me $500, but they're going out to eat 3 times a week. Where's my money? And then they're thinking, you got your thumb on me, you're trying to control me because I'm not giving your money back fast enough. So I almost lost one of my best friends at Moody over that because he borrowed $700 from me for a stereo outfit. You young people know what a stereo is? So this whole outfit, and he didn't need it, going back to needs. It was something he wanted, and I gave him the money. And he didn't pay me back. For months, he didn't pay me back. And our relationship got strained. And finally, he was mad at me, I was mad at him. He paid me back the money, and we recovered eventually. But be careful with that. If someone wants to borrow money from you for a purchase that is not a necessity, don't loan it. That would be a good rule of thumb. Yes?
What we found out through the years is they spend their money on what they wanna do. And it made us, like you said, it makes you watch what they're doing, and you're thinking, you know what, you could have not borrowed from us.
Yeah. You saved up your own money.
Yes.
Yes. So it can change relationships. It can hurt relationships.
Yes, sir.
And is not the best. So, and again, if somebody has a great need, they don't have food, their car's broken down, they can't get to work, and they don't have the money, and you do, I think 1 John is very clear. We see our brother or sister in need, we have the funds, help them. Okay? But that's a necessity. That's not a whim. Yeah.
It's also good in that situation to give it to them.
Okay.
Even if they say they're gonna pay you back, don't expect it, and then you don't worry about what they spend. And we had that situation
Yep.
where actually we were in a position where we needed some money, and they sent the money back. We had totally forgotten that we'd even given it to them. It was like $700 ironically.
Really? And they send it back to you? Okay.
But we weren't worried. It was a loan, but we took it like we gave it to them. We weren't even thinking about that.
Hold on to that, Larry.
So that-
Okay.
That changes kind of your attitude.
Yes.
But then they did end up and did pay us back,
Okay.
years later.
Years later. Yeah.
Well, that was fine, 'cause we gave.
Yeah, that was fine. Yeah. Yeah, Heidi?
But again, on the car thing, okay, so I know this person, and her car broke down, but I know she's very bad at money. And I even helped, I will help get a budget or whatever, but there's no way. So it's like,
Yeah.
do I just give her that money?
Well, that's a really good point, and often it's good to, okay, I'll help you, but I'm going to sit down with you and work on your money. We're going to work on a budget. We're going to do things differently here. If they're not willing to do that, then don't worry about that. So same thing with people that come in. And some of our people at the church who need money, benevolent fund, we want to sit down and work with them to see if they're managing well. Because long term, we want to help them, not simply give them a short term money. That's good. Let's go with a couple more. If it is a need, don't loan. As Kurt says, give it to them. Go to Luke chapter 6, verse 34. This is a very important principle found in the New Testament, Luke 6:34. And I think this is where you ought to be when you're helping people financially. It says, verse 34, if you lend to those from whom you expect to receive, what credit is that to you? Even sinners lend to sinners in order to receive back the same amount. But love your enemies and do good, and lend, expecting nothing in return, and your reward will be great, and you will be sons of the Most High. Okay, here's the principle. You don't loan, you give. So if you have the resources to give somebody money, you give it as a gift. If they pay it back, like Kurt's friends did, so much the better. But if they don't pay it back, you don't expect it back. And so your relationship is not strained here, and you're not putting them under obligation that they may not be ever able to deal with. But that shows our love and concern for somebody that might have some need. So we give them the money, and maybe they'll give it back, or maybe they don't. But I think this is a really good principle in that. And then one more that we should mention, go to Proverbs 17:18. Proverbs 17:18. Don't co-sign. Proverbs talks about this a lot. Don't co-sign with somebody else. Here's the Proverbs 17:18. A man lacking a heart of wisdom strikes his hand in a pledge and becomes a guarantor in the presence of his neighbor. That means that they have co-signed a note. They have gone on record, they'll pay for this bill if you can't pay for it. Now that's not wise to do. 80% of all notes that fail are co-signed notes. So in other words, people go to the bank, they want money for something, let's say a car or some kind of appliances, but they can't get credit. And so they ask you to co-sign a note for them. So you're going online with them saying, okay, for this car, if they can't pay it, I'll pay it. If these appliances, they can't pay it, I'll pay it. Now, nobody ever expects that they're going to do that. But 80% of all notes go belly up like that, those co-signed notes. Why? Because the people originally have not planned ahead so that they can pay bills. They're not managing their money well, so they're not likely to take care of this. One anecdote, and then I'll let you go. Many years ago now, we had an older gentleman in our church, big-hearted guy. Didn't have much money, but he's a big-hearted guy. And there was a young man in our church who was a bit of a scoundrel. He was always taking advantage of people. And he, once again, wanted to buy a stereo outfit. Big speakers and all that kind of stuff for his house. And it was worth several $1,000s. So he had no credit. He couldn't take care of paying the bill. The bank wouldn't give him a dime. So he talked this older gentleman into co-signing for him. 2 months later, he hadn't paid back any payments. The bank came back for that money. The younger guy said, I can't pay it. So what'd they do? They go right after the old gentleman who had already co-signed a note, and he was liable now to pay this bill. And this man didn't have any extra money. He was on his own Social Security stuff. He didn't have any extra money. And now he's getting dinged for a $3,000 stereo outfit that he'll never use. And that literally happened in our church. Be very, very careful. Don't go co-signing notes with people unless you're planning to lose your money. Especially that's true of a car or some kind of thing. Dan?
Do you have a list of what you consider scoundrels in the church that you can share?
I do have. You want to see if you're on the list?
You know, if you just think about that, the reason the bank wants somebody to co-sign it is they know that guy's high risk. He's probably not gonna pay back.
Yep,
So why would you think that you're gonna be okay?
that's right. Unless you're willing to lose the money with good heart, you better not do that. Okay, this is on spending. I just gave Larry some handouts as you walk out. Why don't you take one of those handouts, working on spending. You can look at that for next week as we look at debt. This is to divide up your expenses on a monthly basis. So grab one of those worksheets as you leave, fill it out, bring it back next week when we look at debt. Okay? Thank you.